Once upon a time,
In the lively city of Lagos, there lived a 17-year-old girl named Evelyn. She was the only surviving child of her parents, Patrick and Linda. They were not rich, but they were not poor either. Her mother owned a small provision store in the market, and her father worked as a commercial driver. Though they did not have much, they were content.
and their greatest joy was their daughter, Evelyn. Evelyn was a well-mannered and beautiful girl with a heart full of kindness.
She was in her final year of secondary school and helped her mother at the market whenever she had free time.
Her parents adored her deeply. After all,
She was their only child, the only one who had survived.
before Evelyn was born, her parents had suffered great losses.
Each time they welcomed a new baby, their happiness was short-lived. The child would suddenly fall sick and die. 5 times they had gone through this heartbreaking cycle. By the time Evelyn arrived, they had almost lost hope.
But she lived, and because of that, her parents cherished her beyond words.
You are the light of this family, her father always told her. As long as you are happy.
We are happy. Her mother too.
Never stopped reminding her of how special she was.
You are God's gift to us, she would say.
Stroking Evelyn's hair with love.
Their little family lived in peace.
But life had its own plans. It started with a cough, an ordinary, dry cough. "Mama, maybe you need some rest," Evelyn said one evening when she noticed her mother pressing her chest.
Looking exhausted. I'm fine, my dear.
Her mother assured her, forcing a weak smile. "It's just stress."
Nothing serious. But the cough did not stop.
It grew worse, followed by fever, weakness,
and loss of appetite. One evening, Evelyn returned home from school and found her mother lying on the couch.
shivering despite the heat. Sweat covered her face, and her lips were dry and cracked. "Mama?" Evelyn ran to her side, fear creeping into her heart. "What's wrong?"
Her mother opened her eyes slightly. I don't know, my dear. My body feels weak. Evelyn panicked. She rushed outside to call her father, who had just returned from work. The moment he saw his wife,
Worry spread across his face. Without wasting time, he lifted her in his arms and carried her to the car. Evelyn sat in the back seat, her heart pounding as they drove to the hospital.
The hospital was cold and smelled of medicine. Nurses moved quickly, attending to patients. A doctor examined Mrs. Linda, checked her pulse, and ran some tests. When he returned, his face was serious. "Mr. Patrick, your wife's condition is critical.
She has multiple infections,
and her immune system is very weak.
We need to admit her immediately." Evelyn's father nodded quickly. "Doctor, please do everything you can to save her. She is all I have." From that moment,
The hospital became their second home every day.
Evelyn and her father sat by her mother's bedside,
Hoping for good news.
Some days, she seemed better. She would smile weakly and whisper,
Don't worry, my child.
"God is in control." But some days were terrible,
Her breathing became difficult,
and she could barely speak. The doctors spoke in low tones.
and Evelyn's stomach twisted with fear.
Then, the worst happened. It was a rainy afternoon. Evelyn had just returned from school and rushed to the hospital.
Still in her uniform, as she stepped into the room, something felt different. The air was heavy.
Her father sat beside the bed.
His face buried in his hands. Evelyn's heart dropped. Mama?
She called softly, stepping closer. There was no response.
Her
Her mother lay still, her eyes closed, her chest no longer rising and falling. The machines beside her had gone silent. Evelyn froze.
Her fingers trembled as she reached out to touch her mother's hand. It was cold.
Too cold. "No, no. Mama, wake up."
Her voice cracked as she shook her gently. Please wake up. Her father took a deep breath. She's gone, Evelyn,
he whispered. "No," Evelyn screamed.
shaking her mother harder. Mama, please, don't leave me. You promised. But there was no reply.
Tears filled her eyes as she fell to the floor, sobbing.
Evelyn clung to her mother's lifeless body, her cries filling the quiet hospital room. Tears streamed down her face as she shook her gently.
Hoping, praying that she would wake up. But her mother did not move. She lay still, her warmth already fading.
Her father, Patrick, placed a firm but gentle hand on her shoulder. His own face was soaked with tears, but he was trying to be strong for her. Evelyn, my daughter, his voice cracked. I know this is painful, but you must be strong. Evelyn shook her head, sobbing harder.
"Papa, she's gone. She's really gone." Patrick pulled her into his arms,
Holding her tightly. I know, my child, I know.
he whispered, His own body trembled.
But he refused to break down. He had to be the pillar now. Minutes passed before he spoke again. Listen to me, Evelyn.
I will do everything in my power to take care of you. I will work hard. I will send you to school, even to the university. You will not suffer, I promise you. Just be strong, my daughter, and make your mother proud.
Evelyn sniffled, wiping her tears, but her heart ached deeply.
The following weeks were filled with sorrow. The news of her mother's passing spread, and relatives started calling,
offering condolences. Plans were made to take her mother's body back to their village for burial. When the day finally came,
Evelyn and her father traveled home. The journey felt endless, and every mile brought fresh waves of pain.
As they entered the village,
neighbors and relatives gathered, whispering and shaking their heads in pity. Evelyn sat quietly as her father greeted the elders. She barely listened. Her mind was lost in memories her mother's laughter, the way she used to call her name,
the warmth of her embrace.
It didn't feel real that she was gone. The burial was painful. Dressed in black, Evelyn stood beside her father, watching as they lowered her mother into the ground.
The priest prayed, relatives cried,
and sand was thrown onto the coffin. With every handful of dirt, the reality sank deeper into her soul. She wished she had done more. She wished she had hugged her mother longer, spent more time with her, told her every single day how much she loved her.
If she had known, she would have created endless memories.
But now, it was too late. Tears poured down her face, and she sobbed silently. What can I do? She whispered to herself. She's gone forever. After the burial, it was time to return to Lagos. Evelyn and her father packed their bags,
ready to leave. But just as they stepped outside, a tall man dressed in expensive clothes approached them. Evelyn, my dear, how are you?
The man smiled, but there was something about his tone that felt strange. She looked at her father,
confused.
Patrick sighed and greeted the man stiffly. Good afternoon, Jacob. Jacob.
Evelyn had heard that name before. Her father had mentioned him a few times, his cousin from the village, a very wealthy man.
Jacob folded his arms, eyeing Patrick with amusement.
We have all seen your struggles, cousin. Lagos life is not easy. You are suffering, and you know it.
Patrick's face hardened, but he said nothing. Jacob turned to Evelyn. My dear.
I know you just lost your mother, and I feel for you. That's why I have a suggestion. He continued,
smiling as if he was doing them a great favor. Patrick's eyes narrowed. What suggestion? Jacob cleared his throat.
Let Evelyn stay with me.
I am wealthy, as you know.
I will sponsor her education.
She will never lack anything.
Instead of dragging her back to Lagos to suffer,
leave her with me. I will treat her well.
He placed a hand on Patrick's shoulder. You know I'm a good man.
Patrick immediately shook his head. Thank you for your concern.
But I can take care of my daughter.
Jacob frowned. Patrick, think about it. Lagos is hard.
And you are just a driver.
Why struggle when she can have a better life? Patrick's jaw tightened. A better life is not just about money. I will raise my daughter myself. I promise my wife.
And I will keep that promise.
Jacob let out a short laugh,
shaking his head as if Patrick was making a foolish decision. All right, he said finally, stepping back. But when things get tough,
don't forget my offer. Patrick did not reply. He took Evelyn's hand, and together they left for Lagos. Back in Lagos, life slowly returned to normal.
Though nothing truly felt the same.
Patrick resumed his driving job,
waking up early every morning and returning late at night. Though his heart was still broken from losing his wife, he forced himself to keep going.
He had to be strong for Evelyn. Evelyn, on the other hand,
felt the weight of her mother's absence everywhere. She would wake up in the morning expecting to hear her mother's voice, only to be met with silence.
The house felt empty. At school, she tried to focus on her studies,
but her mind often drifted.
Her classmates would laugh and talk about their mothers,
and she would lower her head, feeling a sharp pain in her chest. At home, it was worse. Every corner of the house reminded her of her mother.
The small kitchen where she used to cook, the living room where they sat together, the shop where she helped her sell provisions. It was unbearable. When her father was at work, Evelyn would cry, sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly. She missed her mother terribly, and no matter how much she tried to be strong,
the pain never went away. One evening, as she sat on the bed staring at her mother's picture,
tears rolled down her cheeks.
"Mama, I miss you," she whispered.
"Why did you have to go?" There was no answer, just silence. Her father walked into the room and saw her wiping her tears.
He sat beside her and sighed. I know it's hard.
Evelyn, I miss her too.
She leaned on his shoulder. Papa, does the pain ever go away?
Patrick hesitated before answering. Maybe with time, it gets easier.
But some wounds never fully heal. We just learn to live with them.
Evelyn nodded, holding his hand, at least.
She still had her father. Evelyn returned from school and immediately got to work.
She swept the floor, washed the dishes, and prepared something light to eat.
After finishing her chores,
She settled down to study.
despite everything she had been through, she was determined to do well in school.
Education was the only thing her parents had always emphasized, and she knew she had to make them proud. As days passed, her studies became more demanding,
But she remained focused. Then came the time for her senior secondary school examination. It was a crucial moment for her. It was the exam.
that would determine her chances of gaining.
Admission into the university. She had told her father about it before her mother's passing.
And he had assured her that he would pay the fees soon.
Don't worry, my daughter.
Patrick had said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I will make sure the money is ready before the deadline.
Evelyn had believed him. She trusted her father completely. But as the days went by, the deadline drew closer, and her school had still not received the payment. One morning, during assembly,
The principal made an announcement. All students who have not paid their examination fees should leave the school premises immediately. You will not be allowed to attend classes until you settle your payments.
Evelyn's heart dropped. She knew she hadn't paid. She silently prayed that they wouldn't notice her.
But her name was among the list of students read out. Evelyn Patrick, a teacher called. You need to go home until your fees are paid.
Shame washed over her as she picked up her school bag and walked out of the school compound. Students whispered as she passed by, and she kept her head down.
Fighting back tears when she got home. She hoped to find her father so she could tell him what had happened.
But he was not there. She sat on the old wooden chair in the living room, staring at the clock. Minutes turned into hours. But Patrick had not yet returned. When the door finally creaked open in the evening, Evelyn jumped up. Her father stepped in, looking tired from work. But the moment he saw her expression,
He knew something was wrong. Evelyn, what is it? He asked, concern in his voice. She hesitated before speaking. Papa.
I was sent home from school today. His face tensed. Why?
Evelyn lowered her head. Because of the unpaid examination fees. Patrick ran a tired hand over his face. Oh, my daughter.
I am so sorry. I didn't know they would send you home so soon. But don't worry. I will pay the money this week.
I promise. Her heart lifted.
Really, Papa? Yes. He nodded. You will write your exams. I give you my word. Overcome with relief.
Evelyn rushed to hug her father.
He held her tightly, gently patting her back. You are all I have, my daughter. I won't let you suffer.
He whispered. That night, after serving him dinner, she watched as he took a bite. He said, smiling.
You cook just like your mother.
A small smile appeared on Evelyn's lips. Really?
Yes. He nodded. She would have been so proud of you. Hearing those words made her heart swell with warmth. She missed her mother every day, but moments like these made her feel closer to her. The next morning, before Evelyn even woke up, her father had already left for work.
He was determined to gather the money for her school fees.
Evelyn got ready for the day, but she couldn't shake off the anxiety in her heart.
She wanted her father to return home safely. She wanted them to be okay.
As evening approached, she sat by the door, waiting for him. Hours passed.
It was now PM.
Then 10 p.m. Still.
There was no sign of her father. She picked up her phone and dialed his number, but it was not reachable. Her chest tightened. Maybe his car broke down.
She reassured herself, trying not to panic.
She continued waiting. 11 p.m.
12 a.m. Still. He hadn't returned. At this point,
Fear crawled into her heart.
something felt wrong. But what could she do?
She had no one else in Lagos, no relatives nearby.
No friends she could call. She lay on the bed.
Clutching her pillow tightly, and eventually,
Exhaustion took over. She fell asleep, though her mind remained restless. Bang!
bang, bang.
A loud knock on the door startled her awake. Her eyes flew open. The room was still dark.
The knocking came again, harder this time.
Evelyn quickly got up. Her heart pounded. Papa?
She whispered. She rushed to the door, praying that it was her father. But when she opened it, she froze. A strange man stood in front of her. He was tall, with a serious expression on his face. She had never seen him before. "Good morning, sir," Evelyn greeted politely,
trying to hide her nervousness. "Do you need help?"
The man shook his head.
"No," he said, his voice firm.
Evelyn's stomach twisted. Then, "What do you want?" The man took a deep breath before speaking. "It's about your father." Evelyn stood at the doorway, staring at the man in front of her. His face was serious. His lips pressed together like he was struggling to speak.
The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating.
"Your father." The man paused. His eyes filled with pity. "He was shot by some robbers last night on his way home." Evelyn's heart stopped. The world around her seemed to freeze. "I'm sorry to say this, but he didn't make it," the man continued, his voice gentle but firm. Evelyn gasped, her breath catching in her throat. She felt the ground shift beneath her feet, like the whole world was crumbling. No, this couldn't be true. Her father had left for work yesterday. He had promised to gather her school fees. He had promised to take care of her. "You're lying." Evelyn's voice cracked as she shook her head violently. "My papa will come back. He will come back." The man sighed deeply, his face filled with sorrow. "Before he died, he asked me to tell you that he was able to gather your school fees, but the robbers took it. He also said to tell you that he loves you." Evelyn's knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the floor. No, not her father, not the only person she had left in this world. The man knelt beside her, trying to hold her up. "I know this is hard, but please, you have to be strong." "Strong?" she screamed, tears pouring down her face. "How can I be strong? My father is gone. My mother is gone. I have no one. What am I going to do?" She clutched her chest, gasping for air as the pain tore through her. Her dream of becoming a pilot gone, her future shattered. Where would she get the money for school? How would she survive in this world all alone? The man gently placed a hand on her shoulder, but she shoved him away. "Leave me alone," she wailed, rocking back and forth on the floor. Tears blinded her vision as memories of her father flooded her mind. His warm smile, his reassuring words, the way he always said, "You will be great." My daughter. Now he was gone. Just like her mother, she was alone, utterly alone. The morning sun rose over the city, casting long golden rays through the small window of Evelyn's house. But there was no warmth in her heart. The air felt heavy, filled with grief and uncertainty. The news of her father's death had spread quickly, and by mid-morning, 2 of his uncles arrived at the house. They came in a black SUV, stepping out with solemn faces, but Evelyn could see through their pretended concern. "My daughter, take heart," one of them said, patting her shoulder as she sat on the floor, her eyes swollen from crying all night. "We are here for you," the other added, nodding his head. Evelyn lifted her gaze to them. She knew these men, Uncle Jacob and Uncle Philip. They were her father's older brothers. They had money, big houses, and successful businesses. Yet they never helped her father when he was alive. Now they stood before her, acting like they cared. She bit her lip, trying to hold back her anger. They had never been there for her family. Not when her mother fell sick. Not when her father struggled to pay the hospital bills. Not even when he worked himself to the bone just to give her a good life. And now they were telling her not to worry. Evelyn let out a deep sigh. Worrying was all she had left. "We came to make arrangements to take your father's body back to the village," Uncle Philip said, adjusting his cap. "The elders have already started preparing for the burial." Evelyn simply nodded. What else could she do? She had no say in anything anymore. Claiming her father's body the next day, she followed her uncles to the police station to claim her father's body. It was a long and tiring process. They had to sign papers, answer questions, and wait for approvals. Evelyn sat in the corner, watching her uncles handle everything. She felt like an outsider in her own life. Finally, after hours of back and forth, the officers released her father's body. It was placed in a simple casket and loaded into the back of a van. Evelyn's heart ached as she stared at it. This was really happening. Her father was truly gone. She climbed into the van with her uncles, and they began the long journey to the village. The burial. The burial was simple but painful. People gathered to mourn, dressed in black. The priest said prayers, and tears flowed freely. Evelyn stood close to the grave, her hands clenched into fists. As the casket was lowered into the ground, a sharp pain stabbed her chest. "Goodbye, Papa," she whispered, tears running down her cheeks. She didn't want to say those words. She didn't want to accept that this was her new reality.
By evening, most of her father's relatives started leaving.
The village became quiet again. Evelyn sat on a bench outside,
Staring at the sky. She had nowhere to go. Going back to Lagos was not an option. Who would feed her? Who would pay her bills? She knew how hard life was.
1,000 naira couldn't even buy a proper meal these days. Her mind raced. Should she live with Uncle Jacob? No, she had seen the way he spoke to her father during her mother's burial. He had no respect for him. He had no love for her. Tears filled her eyes again.
Where will I go?
She thought miserably.
Evelyn. She looked up. A man stood in front of her.
He was tall, with a kind face. Uncle Williams? She asked. He nodded and smiled.
Uncle Williams was her father's younger brother.
He was different from the others. He was a pastor, a man of God. He owned a big church in Abuja, and people always talked about how he helped the needy. I saw you sitting alone, he said gently.
I know things are hard for you right now, but don't worry. You will come with me to Abuja. Evelyn's eyes widened. Me? She asked, surprised. Yes, he nodded.
My wife and children are abroad, so it's just me in the house.
I will train you in school.
Just be a good girl, and that's all.
Evelyn felt a small spark of hope in her heart. At least she wouldn't have to live with Uncle Jacob.
At least she wouldn't have to struggle in Lagos.
Uncle Williams had the fear of God. He would treat her well.
Thank you, sir, she said softly, wiping her tears. The next day, she packed her small bag, and they left for Abuja. When they arrived, Evelyn couldn't believe her eyes.
Her uncle's house was massive.
It had tall gates, shining windows,
and a big compound with flowers neatly arranged.
Her father's house in Lagos had been small and old, but this was like a palace.
She followed him inside, staring in awe at the high ceilings and sparkling floors. Welcome home, Uncle William said with a smile. Come, let me show you your room. Evelyn walked behind him as he led her to a spacious room.
The bed was soft, the curtains clean, and the air smelled fresh.
For the first time in a long time,
she thought, I might actually sleep well.
That night, she lay on the comfortable bed, staring at the ceiling.
Her father was gone. Her mother was gone. But maybe, just maybe, things would get better.
The next morning, Uncle Williams took her to a private school in the city. She sat in his car as he parked in front of the tall school gate. Students in neat uniforms walked in and out, chatting happily. Evelyn's heart raced.
Would she really be one of them?
Uncle Williams took her inside and spoke to the principal. Within minutes, everything was settled.
When they walked out, Uncle Williams smiled at her.
You are now a registered student. You will sit for your senior secondary school exam.
Evelyn gasped. Just like that? She whispered.
Yes, he nodded.
She blinked, struggling to process everything. Just yesterday, she had no hope. Just yesterday, she thought her dreams were over.
Now, her future was back on track. She looked at her uncle, gratitude filling her heart.
Thank you, sir, she said, her voice trembling.
He patted her shoulder.
Just work hard, my dear.
That's all I ask.
As they drove back home, Evelyn's mind wandered.
Her uncles had money.
They had always had money. So why didn't they help my father when he needed them?
She didn't know the answer. But one thing was clear: life was full of surprises.
And hers had just begun again.
For the first time in a long time, Evelyn felt happy.
She no longer woke up worrying about what she would eat or how she would survive. Life in Abuja was different.
Her uncle, Pastor Williams, provided everything she needed.
The kitchen was always filled with different kinds of food: rice, beans, yams, even cartons of noodles and snacks. She didn't have to struggle anymore.
Her uncle also made sure she attended church every Sunday. The first time she stepped into his church, she was amazed.
The building was massive, almost like a stadium.
The chairs were neatly arranged, and the air smelled fresh, like perfume.
The choir sang beautifully,
and the members, men and women, dressed in expensive clothes,
with shining shoes and gold jewelry.
So this is how rich people worship God,
she thought as she sat quietly in a corner. She had never been inside a church this big before.
Back in Lagos, she and her father attended a small church with wooden benches and a leaking roof. But here, everything was grand.
After service, people greeted her warmly.
Pastor's daughter, one woman asked, smiling at her.
No, she's his niece, another corrected. Evelyn only nodded and smiled. She still felt out of place, but at least no one treated her badly. A strange feeling.
As the weeks passed, Evelyn settled into her new life.
She focused on her studies and spent most of her time at home, except on Sundays when she followed her uncle to church. Pastor Williams took care of her well. He bought her new clothes, shoes, and even a phone. "You are a beautiful girl, Evelyn," he would often say.
At first, she thought nothing of it.
But as time went on, she began to feel uncomfortable.
Her uncle's compliments were constant. "Look at your skin, so smooth and fresh," he said one evening as they sat in the living room.
"God really took his time when he created you," he added, smiling. Evelyn forced a smile, but something about the way he looked at her made her uneasy. She had never received such compliments from her father. He always told her she was smart and hard-working, not just beautiful.
She shrugged off the feeling, convincing herself that her uncle was just being nice. "Maybe he's just trying to boost my confidence," she thought. But deep down, something didn't feel right.
The exam.
As the weeks went by, Evelyn's final exams approached.
She studied hard, determined to make her father proud, even though he was no longer here. On the morning of her first paper, her uncle prayed for her. "Go and make us proud," he said, placing his hand on her shoulder.
"Amen," Evelyn whispered.
The exams were tough, but she gave it her best. By the time she wrote the last paper, she was exhausted but relieved. "I did my best," she told herself. "Now, I just have to wait for the results." The celebration. The day the results came out, Evelyn's heart pounded with excitement and fear.
She rushed to check her scores, her hands shaking as she typed in her details.
As the page loaded,
Her eyes widened. She had passed with flying colors.
tears filled her eyes as she stared at the screen. She had done it.
She had made her father proud. She ran to tell her uncle.
"Uncle, I passed," she shouted, breathless from excitement. Pastor Williams smiled broadly.
"I knew you would. You are a smart girl."
That evening, he took her out to celebrate.
They went to a fancy restaurant, one of the best in the city. Evelyn looked around in awe. The place was beautiful,
with chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and soft music playing in the background. The waiter brought them a menu, and her uncle told her to order whatever she wanted. She hesitated. She had never been to a place like this before.
"Go ahead," he urged, smiling. She finally picked fried rice and chicken, and he ordered the same.
As they ate, her uncle was unusually sweet.
"You are special, Evelyn," he said, watching her closely. "You deserve the best."
Evelyn smiled but felt a strange knot in her stomach. She didn't know why, but something about the way he spoke made her uneasy. Pastor Williams continued talking, his voice soft. "You know,
"I have done so much for you," he said, placing his fork down.
Evelyn nodded. "Yes, sir."
"And I am grateful." He leaned forward slightly. "I don't want you to ever forget that."
Evelyn swallowed hard.
"I won't," she whispered. Her uncle smiled, but behind that smile, there was something else. Evelyn didn't know what it was, but she could feel it.
And for the first time since coming to Abuja, she felt afraid. After they finished eating, Uncle William smiled warmly at Evelyn and said,
"Let's go somewhere special." Evelyn, still excited about her excellent results, nodded eagerly.
She had never been to a shopping mall before.
Her father had always taken her to the local market for clothes, and even then, they only bought what was necessary. When they arrived at the shopping mall, Evelyn's eyes widened in amazement. The place was massive,
with bright lights and glass windows displaying expensive clothes and shoes.
People moved around, carrying large shopping bags, their faces filled with joy. "Go on, my dear," Uncle William said, his voice filled with kindness.
"Pick anything you like." Evelyn hesitated. "Uncle, everything here looks expensive."
He chuckled.
"Don't worry about the price. Just choose what you want. You deserve it."
Feeling shy but excited,
she carefully selected a few dresses, skirts, and blouses. She didn't want to take too much. "Is that all?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, Uncle. This is enough."
"Thank you so much." He smiled and patted her shoulder. "Even your father would be proud of you." Those words touched Evelyn's heart.
She missed her father dearly, but hearing Uncle William say that made her feel a little better. After paying for the clothes, they drove home. The ride was quiet, and Evelyn was lost in thought. She was grateful for her uncle's kindness. Maybe God had sent him to help her since she had no one else.
When they got home, she thanked him again.
"Uncle, I really appreciate everything you've done for me."
"May God bless you." He smiled and nodded. "Go and rest. You deserve it." Evelyn hurried to her room,
eager to try on the clothes. She stood in front of the mirror, admiring herself in the new outfits. She twirled in excitement, feeling like a princess for the first time in her life. Just then, her door opened. She turned quickly, startled. It was Uncle William's. She felt uneasy because she was not properly dressed. She quickly grabbed a scarf to cover herself. "Uncle, you should have knocked," she said, feeling uncomfortable. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked closer to her and said, "Evelyn, I want us to talk." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Okay. What do you want to talk about?" He smiled. "You have done well, my dear. You are intelligent, hardworking, and beautiful. You deserve the best. That is why I have decided that next year you will go to the university." Evelyn's eyes lit up with excitement. "Really, Uncle? Thank you so much. I will do my best to make you proud." "Yes," he nodded. "You will write the JAM exam next month, and I will make sure you get into the best university." Evelyn was overjoyed. "Uncle, I don't know how to thank you." But then something felt strange. As she spoke, she noticed the way he was looking at her. His eyes were not like before. There was something different about them, something dark and unsettling. His gaze traveled over her body, and suddenly, he reached out and placed his hand on her chest. Evelyn froze. "Uncle, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice shaky. He smiled, but it was not the warm, fatherly smile she knew. It was something else. "Evelyn, you are a very beautiful girl. You were made carefully by God." His hand pressed harder against her chest. Evelyn gasped and stepped back, trying to move away, but he followed her. "Uncle, please stop. You are scaring me." But he didn't stop. Instead, he moved closer, his breathing heavy. "The only thing I need from you right now is obedience," he said, his voice firm. "I have done everything to make you comfortable, and this is your way of saying thank you." Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. She tried to run, but before she could reach the door, Uncle Williams grabbed her and pushed her onto the bed. "Uncle, what are you trying to do?" she screamed, struggling against his grip. But he was too strong. "Shh," he whispered. "Don't fight me. It will be over soon." Tears streamed down Evelyn's face as she fought with all her strength, but it was useless. He overpowered her. She screamed again, but no one was there to help. And then pain, unbearable pain. Evelyn cried, her body shaking. The man she trusted, the man who called himself a pastor, had done the unimaginable. When he was done, he stood up, fixed his trousers, and looked at her. "Nobody must know about this," he said coldly. "If you tell anyone, you won't like what I will do to you." Evelyn lay there, unable to move. She was broken. With tears in her eyes, she nodded slowly. Without another word, he stepped out and closed the door behind him. Evelyn curled into a ball, sobbing. "I thought he was a good man. I thought he had the fear of God in his heart." She tried to stand up, but her legs felt weak. Pain shot through her body, and she winced. "How could he do this to me?" she whispered, her voice shaking. She looked around the room, but everything felt different now. The house that once felt safe now felt like a prison. She wanted to scream, to run, to disappear, but where would she go? Uncle Williams had taken everything from her. Her innocence, her trust, her hope. She had lost her father. She had lost her mother. And now she had lost herself. Tears streamed down her face as she lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in her life, she felt completely alone. The next morning, Evelyn lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. She hadn't slept all night. The pain in her body had lessened, but the pain in her heart only grew worse. She still could not believe what had happened. "Why, Uncle?" Tears welled up in her eyes again, but she quickly wiped them away. She didn't want to cry anymore. She was tired of crying. Her door creaked open, and her heart jumped. But it was just the housemaid bringing her breakfast. "Good morning, Auntie Evelyn," the maid said, setting the tray on the small table by the bed. Evelyn nodded but said nothing. She wasn't hungry. A few minutes later, she heard Uncle Williams moving around in the living room. Normally, he would call her to join him for morning prayers, but today he didn't. "He can't even look at me." Good. She didn't want to see his face either. She closed her eyes and prayed silently. "God, why did you let this happen to me? I have no parents, and now the only person I trusted has betrayed me. Please help me." A fake life. Evening came, and Evelyn was in her room when she heard a knock on the door. She froze. Not again.
Her hands trembled as she walked to the door and opened it slightly. Uncle William stood there, dressed in his church clothes.
"Go and get ready," he said, his voice calm as if nothing had happened.
"We are going to church for evening service."
Evelyn's heart pounded. Church? She wanted to scream. How could he act so normal?
How could he still call himself a man of God after what he had done?
But she had no choice. "Yes, uncle," she said softly, avoiding his eyes.
She quickly dressed in a long gown and followed him to the car.
The ride was quiet.
Uncle Williams didn't say a word, and Evelyn kept her eyes on the window,
watching the buildings pass by.
When they arrived at the church, people greeted Uncle Williams with respect. "Pastor." "Good evening, sir."
"Good evening, sir. God bless you."
He smiled and responded warmly, shaking hands and patting people's backs.
Evelyn wanted to throw up. As they entered the church, she found a seat at the back, far away from him. She didn't want to sit near him. The choir sang, and prayers were made, but Evelyn couldn't concentrate. Her mind was too heavy with pain.
Then Uncle Williams walked up to the pulpit. She sat up, her heart pounding.
He adjusted the microphone and cleared his throat.
"Today, we will talk about fornication and adultery." Evelyn's whole body went stiff.
She stared at him in shock. Is this man serious? She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Fornication is a sin," he continued.
"Adultery is evil. The Bible says in Hebrews 13:4 that marriage should be honored,
and the bed should be kept pure.
Those who are sexually immoral will be judged by God."
Evelyn's hands clenched into fists. She could feel her heartbeat in her ears.
Her uncle, the man who had forced himself on her, was standing there,
preaching about purity and holiness. She wanted to stand up and scream in front of everyone. This man is a liar.
But she stayed silent.
She had no one. No one would believe her. By the time the service ended, she felt even worse than before.
As they walked back to the car, she felt like she was suffocating.
She wanted to run away. But where would she go?
A new horror.
The car ride home was silent. Evelyn stared out the window, trying to stop herself from crying.
When they got to the house, she quickly got out of the car and hurried inside. But before she could reach her room, she heard his voice. "Evelyn."
She stopped.
Slowly, she turned around. Her uncle stood there, looking at her with a strange expression. "Go inside and change into something more beautiful," he said.
"Wear something
more alluring." Evelyn's stomach turned.
"What?" she whispered. "You heard me," he said, his voice colder now. "After that, I want you to start taking pictures. Nice ones, or else." Evelyn felt like the floor was disappearing under her feet. She shook her head.
"Uncle, please."
He took a step closer.
"You don't want to know what I would do if you disobey me,"
he said, his eyes dark with anger. She swallowed hard. She had no choice.
Slowly, she walked to her room, her whole body trembling.
Tears streamed down her face as she changed into a dress she didn't want to wear. She picked up her phone, her hand shaking, and took the pictures. After a few minutes, he knocked on her door.
"Are you done?"
She didn't answer.
The door opened.
He walked in, took the phone from her hands, and scrolled through the pictures. "Good," he said, "but you can do better next time."
Then, before she could react, he grabbed her wrist and pushed her onto the bed.
"No, please," she begged.
But he didn't listen.
This time, it was worse, more painful, more disgusting. Evelyn cried and cried, but no one could hear her. When he was done, he stood up and adjusted his clothes. "Remember," he said, "nobody must know." Then he walked out, leaving her broken once again. A silent cry for help.
Evelyn curled into a ball, sobbing.
Her whole body ached.
Her heart felt like it had been ripped apart.
She missed her parents. She missed the life she had before.
Why is Uncle doing this to me? She felt trapped.
I have to leave.
She knew one thing for sure: if she stayed here, her uncle would never stop.
She had to escape ... and no matter what. The next morning, Evelyn woke up feeling numb. She had spent most of the night crying, staring at the ceiling, and thinking of how to escape. But now, as the sun rose, she made up her mind. She had to act like nothing was wrong.
She took a deep breath, wiped her face, and stepped out of her room. Uncle Williams was already at the dining table, eating breakfast.
When he saw her, he smiled.
"Good morning, Evelyn," he said.
Evelyn forced a smile. "Good morning, Uncle." She sat down and picked up a spoon, though she had no appetite. He cleared his throat. My wife will be back this weekend.
Evelyn froze for a second, her heart skipping a beat.
His wife?
She didn't know how to feel about that. Would things get better, or would they get worse? She nodded slowly.
Okay, uncle.
He didn't notice the storm raging inside her. He thought she was still the weak girl he had been controlling.
But unknown to him, Evelyn had already started making her own plans.
A desperate attempt. One afternoon, Evelyn was in her room, scrolling through her phone.
She had been texting someone, but she was careful. She didn't want her uncle to suspect anything. Just as she was about to type another message, her door swung open.
She gasped and quickly dropped her phone. Uncle William stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His eyes were dark with the same evil she had seen before.
Fear gripped her.
"Uncle, please,"
she whispered, taking a step back.
He smiled and sat on the edge of her bed. "Evelyn, listen to me." His voice was soft, almost gentle.
This will be the last time. I promise. Evelyn felt sick. Since my wife will soon be back, this is our final chance.
He continued, moving closer.
Just let me.
"No, Uncle," Evelyn said firmly, shaking her head. "Please, don't do this." His smile faded. His face twisted with anger. "After everything I've done for you,"
he hissed. You think you have a choice?
She turned to run, but he grabbed her wrist and pulled her back.
No, she screamed, struggling against him. Please, stop.
But he didn't care. He pushed her down, pinning her to the bed. Evelyn fought with everything she had, but he was stronger.
Tears streamed down her face as she begged. Uncle, please. Why are you doing this to me? He didn't answer.
Then
the door creaked open. The unexpected visitor. For a moment, neither of them noticed.
Uncle Williams was too focused on what he was doing, and Evelyn was too lost in her pain. But then a sharp voice cut through the air. "Williams!" Uncle Williams froze.
His grip on Evelyn loosened, and he slowly turned his head.
His wife stood at the doorway. She wasn't supposed to be back yet, but there she was, standing with a calm but dangerous look on her face.
Evelyn gasped, quickly rolling off the bed and running to her.
Uncle Williams jumped to his feet, his face pale.
Why didn't you call me before coming? He stammered, trying to sound normal.
You were supposed to return in a few days. His wife crossed her arms.
A small smile played on her lips, but there was no warmth in her eyes. So this is what you've been doing? Uncle Williams swallowed hard. I can explain, he said quickly, stepping toward her. It's not what it looks like.
But she raised her hand, stopping him.
I have a video, she said coldly.
Williams froze in place. What? His wife pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. A video played Evelyn's messages to her, explaining everything he had done.
I didn't believe it at first, she said, her voice steady. I told myself, no, my husband is a man of God. He wouldn't do something so evil.
But look at you.
Uncle William's face crumpled.
Please, I can change.
Don't tell anyone. I'll never do it again. I swear.
You're a liar, she snapped. You promised Evelyn this would be the last time, didn't you? But I know the truth. If I hadn't walked in, you would have done it again.
Tears rolled down Evelyn's cheeks.
She clung to his wife, her body trembling. Williams dropped to his knees.
Please, honey, don't leave me. Think about the church. Think about our family.
His wife laughed bitterly. Family? She reached into her bag and pulled out a file. A set of divorce papers. With a cold smile, she tossed them at him.
With this evidence, I can boldly walk out of this trap called marriage.
Uncle William's hands shook as he picked up the papers.
No, please, don't do this.
But his wife had already made up her mind. She turned to Evelyn and held her close.
Don't worry, my dear, she whispered.
I'm here to help you.
Evelyn sobbed into her shoulder, feeling safe for the first time in a long time. She was finally free.
Uncle Williams remained on his knees, his hands shaking, tears running down his cheeks. But his wife stood tall, her face strong and steady. She wasn't going to fall for his lies anymore. You can't change, she said coldly.
Not after everything you've done.
He looked up at her with pleading eyes. Please, I've made mistakes, but I can change.
I'll do better. Just give me one more chance. She shook her head slowly, her voice filled with pain.
No, Williams.
You said the same thing years ago. He blinked. What are you talking about? My niece, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Do you remember her? Precious? He swallowed hard.
What does she have to do with this? She died because of you. she said through gritted teeth. She told me something wasn't right.
She tried to speak up.
But I didn't believe her, because I thought you were a man of God. I trusted you.
Uncle Williams looked down in shame. I blamed myself for her death, his wife continued. She was broken, she was hurting, and I turned my back on her because I believed you. But I won't let what happened to Precious happen to Evelyn. Evelyn stood beside her, her eyes wide with shock. You knew about her, Evelyn whispered.
His wife nodded sadly. Yes, she was my sister's daughter.
Just like you are.
And I won't fail you the way I failed her.
Tears spilled from Evelyn's eyes as she hugged her tightly. Thank you, she whispered.
The very first day you texted me, Evelyn, I believed you, his wife said.
And I came back early, just like I promised.
Because I wasn't going to let him hurt you again. She turned to face Williams one last time.
This marriage is over. Don't ever come near us again.
She turned to Evelyn.
Go pack your things, dear. We're leaving tonight.
Evelyn nodded quickly and rushed to her room.
She packed her clothes, her books,
and the little gifts her parents had left her. She didn't cry this time.
She felt lighter, stronger.
For the first time in a long while, she could finally breathe. When she came back downstairs with her bag,
Uncle Williams was still on the floor, holding the divorce papers in his hands.
His wife didn't say another word to him.
She took Evelyn's hand and led her out the door. The next day, Uncle Williams stood before his church,
trying to act like everything was normal.
But he didn't know what was coming. That morning, a letter had been sent to the church board. It was signed by his wife and Evelyn. It explained everything he had done. The truth was out.
During the Sunday service,
one of the elders stood up and asked to read something to the congregation.
Everyone fell silent as he began to read the letter aloud. As the words echoed through the church, the people began to murmur.
Some gasped in shock. Others stood up and walked out. Women looked at him with disgust.
Men shook their heads. Parents held their children close. Uncle William stood frozen at the pulpit, unable to speak. The truth had finally caught up with him.
By the end of the day, almost half of the congregation had left his church.
And more people continued to leave in the following weeks.
His name was ruined.
His title meant nothing. The same people who once praised him now turned away.
A new life begins. Far away from the pain and shame, Evelyn and his wife had flown abroad.
They started a new life together in a peaceful city where no one knew their past.
Evelyn was enrolled in a good school. She studied hard. She smiled more.
She laughed again. She found peace. She also began to dream again.
The dreams she once thought were lost came back to life. She wanted to become a lawyer to speak up for girls like herself who didn't have a voice. And she did. Years passed, and Evelyn grew into a strong, kind, and intelligent young woman. She stood tall and proud.
Her scars didn't define her, they made her stronger. Uncle Williams, on the other hand, lived in regret.
His church had crumbled.
His home was empty. His reputation was destroyed. He would sit alone, looking at old pictures, asking himself the same question over and over again.
Why did I let my evil desires ruin everything? But no one answered. It was too late. Lesson learned. Sometimes the people who wear the brightest robes hide the darkest hearts.
Being a man of God isn't about preaching, it's about living with truth, kindness, and love.
Evil can hide behind smiles and titles, but it can't stay hidden forever. The truth always comes out, and no matter how long it takes, justice always finds its way.
To anyone going through pain like Evelyn, speak up.
You are not alone. Your voice matters.
And to every adult, listen to children.
Protect them. Believe them.
Thank you for watching till the end. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel.